Thank you, Nils. Good morning, everybody. It's always a pleasure for me to come to Norway. Um, I'm sorry I can't speak in Norwegian, but I'll tell you the history of my relationship with Norway, which is quite interesting. I came here to Norway for the first time in around the end of 2005, and I came to Trondheim. So at that time, people called me because I had done a little experiment, which I will talk about shortly, and people wanted to know what it was all about. So I spoke in Trondheim. Then a few years passed, and I got invited to itslearning in 2008, at which time the question was, okay, we heard you in 2005 about your experiment. What happened after that? What else did you do? So I spoke about that. I spoke about what I was doing with children. And then I got an invitation from northern Norway, from a small group of teachers, right up, at the top of the curve of Norway. Luckily, in summer. I don't quite remember the name of the place, except that I know it's near a very interesting little beach with a tall ship in it, called, in northern Norway, it's called Little Jamaica. Okay, so beautiful, absolutely. Anyway, so what is interesting about that trip was that for the first time, I brought that experiment from India into Europe, and not into mainland Europe, but right up near the Arctic in Norway. And it was exciting for me to see it work exactly the same way. And it was exciting for the teachers to say, well, that's exactly like what you were showing us. I said, yes. Children are the same. Then I came back from there. I'm still in touch with them. And after that, it's this time. So now again, several years have passed. Where are we now? So I'm going to tell you the story of the experiments that went along, and as it happens, those trips into Norway in between. But you must also remember that there's something else that is important about our time. That if I tell you the story of 20 years of experiments, the world also was changing in those 20 years. This did not happen in the last century. In the last century, if you did an experiment for 20 years, the world was approximately the same, and you were doing your experiments. But now it's not true. Now it's an interplay of the changes that are happening in the world and the experiments. So to interpret what the result of an experiment is becomes much more difficult, because you have to then say, is it because of the experiment, or is it because of the technology? Is it because of the time, or what? Let's see. I'm going to try, and we'll see where we go. So the future of not education, the future of learning. Okay. Have you noticed that the word learning actually used a lot less than the word education? For some reason. You hear about educational initiatives, educational improvement, educational policy, etc. But you don't hear much about learning. Okay? I wonder why. In fact, if you look for the word learning, where is it used more often, you will find that it is used much more often for example, dog training than it is for human beings. You say, my dog has learnt this. You don't say, my dog has been educated. Okay, but when it's us, no, learning comes second. Okay. Why? We might see that. Okay. What's that? That's a pretty recent slide which I put in about, I think, just the last time I spoke. And I remember that when it came up, then I was standing there and said, oh, why did I put that? Okay, but I know now why I put that. I could ask you a question about it. I could say, is that drop of water falling in? And you might say, well, yeah, it could be, but obviously something else has fallen in before that, because there are those ripples already there before. So maybe something happened and then that drop is falling in. We will come back to that drop later, because it's a little stranger than it looks. So let me go back to 1999. In 1999, I was working in New Delhi, in India, and I used to teach people how to write computer programs, how to develop computing systems. By the way, I don't have a formal background in education. So I didn't study education as a subject. So you will notice that I have big gaps in my understanding of education as a subject, formally. What I studied as a subject is theoretical physics. And at the time when I studied it, physicists were the only people, just about physicists and mathematicians, were the only people who knew how to write computer programs. So we were all dragged into computer programming and said, well, write programs, teach other people to write programs. So that's what I was doing. It was a private school for very rich people, actually, because these programs were very expensive. So I was teaching there, and just outside of my office was this big urban slum, sort of sprawling slum. And there were lots of children in there. So when I used to walk into office, I used to think, isn't it a bit of a waste? Because there must be some very good programmers in that slum. And it's just because of social systems and money that talent is going waste, because nobody is there to teach them. They can't afford anything. But something else was happening back in 1999. For those of you who might remember, the personal computer was beginning to come home. Okay, you could actually, early 90s onwards, you could actually buy a PC and bring it home. It was a very strange concept at that time, to have a computer in the house. Sorry. So my friends and I, we all were beginning to think of buying computers. It was expensive, 2 or 3 months' salary to buy a computer. And we bought these computers. I remember the first time I bought my computer, and it came home, it was a big box. Remember those computers, a big monitor like that, and a big CPU like this, 2 floppy drives, and so on. So I brought it home, and I'm opening my package, and I remember from the corner of my eyes, a little figure, my son, who is about 6, was standing there. And I still remember quite clearly of turning to him and saying, don't even think about it. Okay? This is very expensive. It's a very complex machine. It's a computer. And, that's it. But you can't keep things away from 6-year-olds. So all my friends had this problem. They say, those children, my child, they just won't leave the computer alone. They always want to do something on it. And then I started hearing another strange story. A friend of mine would come and say, my little girl, she's only 7, but I think she may be gifted. So I said, oh, why? Oh, the other day, I lost a file, and I couldn't find it. I was trying to find the file. And she came and said, oh, type dir/w/p and it'll come. Okay? So do you think she's gifted? So I was hearing these stories, and I was thinking, oh, this is rather interesting. all the rich people's children seem to be becoming gifted. You know? So that's when I thought, well, I can't open a school in the slum, I don't have the money. I can't go and teach in the slum because nobody will pay me, but I can give them a computer. One is all I could afford. So I got one computer, and I took it to the slum. Now, where in a slum would you put a computer? There was no place. So there was this boundary wall. So I broke a hole in it, a rectangular hole, put a glass pane, put the monitor from my side of the wall against that, put the CPU on the ground on my side of the wall, and bricked it up. Basically like an ATM. As you can see, a do-it-yourself ATM. And it was 3 feet off the ground with a touchpad. There was no keyboard. And then, in January of 1999, I took a Ethernet cable from my office, completely illegal. I took it and I connected the internet into that computer in the wall. The most powerful internet I could find in those days. It was 2 megabit per second. Okay. So I turned it on. I didn't know what to put on it, so I put nothing on it. It was in English, it was Windows, that's it. And immediately, a whole lot of children arrived there. And they didn't do anything. This is a picture from the first few moments, actually, the only picture I have left. They're just standing there, you know, not saying anything, just looking. Remember, this is 1999, so they don't know what a computer is, and they don't know what the internet is. So, at that point, I thought, this is not going very well. Nothing's happening. Until I learned my first lesson in education. They were not doing anything because, you know, if you have children, and if you have a guy like me with a tie looking down like this at them, they don't do anything. Okay? So I realized suddenly, it has nothing to do with the computer or the technology. It has to do with me. So I turned around and I walked off. And as soon as I walked off, I heard the voices of children behind me. And a few hours later, a friend of mine came and said, who taught them all this? So I said, taught them what? He said, they're browsing and they're teaching each other how to browse. So I said, in what language? And he said, well, it looks like English. So I said, but that's impossible. So he said, that's why I was asking you, how did you teach them? I said, I didn't do anything. I just walked away. So the newspapers came. And the newspapers said, this man claims that slum children in Delhi who don't know any English, who've never seen a computer, can learn how to use a computer by themselves. It's impossible. In those days, it was as impossible as saying that if you leave a Boeing 777 on the road, then children will learn how to fly it. Absurd. So people said, this is impossible. He's made it up. He must have secretly gone and taught them. Okay? So I hadn't, but then I thought, how could it happen? It must be that one of my students must have been passing by and showed the children how to use the mouse. It's possible. So I repeated the experiment. I went away, 300 kilometers away from Delhi, into the heart of remote rural India. And I found a village. A village which was so remote that, where I put another hole-in-the-wall computer, which was so remote that the chances of a passing software engineer would be 0. Okay, even in India. So I put that computer there, and I said, now we'll see what happens. And I came back after a month or so, and I found the children playing games on it. I had not put any games, and they were playing a game on it. And when they saw me, they said, we need a faster processor and a better mouse. So I said, where did you learn that? How do you know all this? And then they said something, my second lesson in education, they made a complaint. They said, this machine works only in English. So we had to teach ourselves English in order to use it. said, oh, you make it sound very simple. But where did you get that game from? And they looked very nervous. So I said, did somebody give you the game? No, we found it. Where did you find it? In the computer? No, they said, and they looked even more puzzled. No. So I said, where? And they said, from there. So I had shivers up my spine. Said, these children are sensing the internet, and they're calling it there. But do you realize something? That even us, this highly educated audience, who use the internet 24 hours a day, if I were to ask you, where is it? Where is the internet? What would you say? There is only one way to say it. You would say, there. The network doesn't exist in reality, in the physical world. The network is there. So that was the beginning of this whole journey, and this big question, who is teaching them? So take a look at this. The press called this experiment the hole in the wall. These are videos over many years, just snippets. This is the original experiment. The boy on the right is 8 years old. To his left is a student. She is 6. And he's teaching her to browse in English. And then hundreds and hundreds of them.
जी है माउस माउस से और अच्छा लगता है चलाने में बहुत अच्छा क्यों है बहुत आसान तरीका
He's saying we need a proper mouse. The Delhi government put 30 of these in slums. One day I asked the child, can you change the color of this picture that you've made? And she pulled out the palette in Microsoft Paint. And this is after she's seen a computer for the first time, 15 days after that. So these were the years between 1999 and 2005. I had some funding from the World Bank. I repeated the experiment in 22 different locations in India and tried to measure what is happening. This is what we found. Well, actually what the numbers told us is the following. Groups of children, okay, everything in this is important. Groups is important. Groups of children, unsupervised, another important word, unsupervised, given access to the internet in a safe and public place. Two important words, safe and public. Will, in a period of 9 months, go from a computing literacy level of 0 to that of the average office secretary in the West. So it blew up the training industry. Everybody said, what's this? How is it happening? And they would ask me, and I would say, I don't know. I don't know. I honestly don't know. It can't be just trial and error because, it's happening too fast for trial and error. Now, of course, all of you would have seen it. You would have seen a 2.5-year-old with an iPad. It's not trial and error. It's something else. So what is it? Well, I'm going to make a guess. That drop of water, remember that one, okay? So unsupervised groups of children can learn to use the internet. That time it was an important result. Now everybody knows it. In 2006, I came to England. And I came to England because a colleague of mine, James Tooley, was in Newcastle University. He had a large research grant. He had just got a large research grant to improve the quality of schooling in India. So he called me and said, "You're the man who should be doing this." So that's how I came to Newcastle. I live near Newcastle. Newcastle is, sort of towards Scotland. If you imagine the map of England, it's a few miles below Edinburgh, so up north. A relatively poorer area of England. So in Newcastle, I was working on this project when a school teacher from one of the local schools came to me. Her name was Emma. And she popped in and said, "What about us?" So I said, "What about you? I mean, you're a developed country, you've got lots of computers, lots of money, my work is not relevant to you." And she said, "No, let's do the hole in the wall in England." And I said, "No, I won't do it." So she said, "Why? Why not?" So I said, "You can't do the hole in the wall experiment in England or in most places in Europe because all you'll get are frozen children. You can't do anything outdoors in these countries." So she said, "Come on, be serious, do something. We will put halogen heaters." I said, "No, that doesn't work." What we did was, I turned the hole in the wall inside out. It's very easy to do. Anybody can do it. Take a classroom, empty out the furniture if you can, or shift it. Take one computer for every 4 children. Okay, so if you have 20 children, take 5 computers. Preferably with big screens. I'll tell you why you need big screens. Put the 5 computers so that from anywhere in the classroom, you can see all the 5 screens. And if you're working on one of the screens, you can see the other 4. If you just have to look like this, you can. Basically, remember, safe public access. So we were trying to reproduce the hole-in-the-wall environment inside the classroom. So 5 computers just scattered there, and bring in the 20 children. So when I did that, the first question the children in England asked is, "So where are all the other computers?" So I said, "I don't know. That's all I have." Okay. So then Emma is saying, "Okay, now I know. Okay, I'm going to ask them to," she's telling me, "I'm going to ask them to make groups and then start work." I said, "Emma, all you have to do is sit down." We teachers, we tend to overdo things. If there are 5 computers and if there are 20 children, what else can they do except make groups? Okay, you don't have to tell them. So I told the children, "Look, I'm going to ask you a question, and you have to find me an answer using those computers. That's all." Immediately the group started to form, some groups of 3, some groups of 5, and this big buzzing noise, okay? Because I hadn't said you can't talk, I hadn't said you can't walk around, everything was allowed. So there was running around, and then in about 15 to 20 minutes' time, the answer would come. It depends on what you ask, okay? If you ask a boring question, they don't engage. But if you ask them an interesting question, we call these questions big questions, okay? I did one just 2 or 3 days ago in England. I'll give you that as an example. What I did was, I had this group of, I think they were 10-year-olds. So I told them, "What do you see in front of you?" They said, "Oh, we see you, we see the blackboard." I said, "And what do you see with?" "Oh, with our eyes." So I said, "If you close your eyes, then we won't see you." So I said, "Okay, try it. Close your eyes and open them when I tell you." So they all closed their eyes. I waited about 5 seconds, then I said, "Okay, open your eyes." And then I pointed to one guy, one little boy, and I said, "What did you see?" I said, "I saw a sheet of white light and something moving inside it." Then I pointed to another, "What did you see?" He said, "I saw a bus full of aliens." Okay. So I said, "But you just said you need your eyes to see, then how come you saw all those things when your eyes were closed?" So now they said, "Oh," they said, "Yeah, we saw things when our eyes were closed." And I said, "Did anybody have a dream?" Somebody, of course, everybody raised, "Yes, I had a dream, I had a dream." So I said, and were your eyes open when you were dreaming? No, they were closed. So I said, okay, here's a question. Why do we dream? And 5 computers. So buzzing, noise. 4, 5, 6 minutes down the line, they start to quieten down. In there are boys and girls, and there's one little girl with ADHD. At least the teacher said she had ADHD. So I said, okay, don't disturb anybody. Just let them be. Let them be. Well, to cut the long story short, that's a big question. Why do we dream? At the end of 20 minutes, the little girl, the so-called ADHD girl, I called her. I said, what have you found? Have you found anything? She said, yes. We stop dreaming when we wake up or when we are dead. Look at that. That's poetry, isn't it? So I don't know what ADHD we're talking about here. So anyway, and then group of boys, the other side, said, yeah, what did you guys find? Anything? Well, you gave us very little time. You see, we had just bumped into a very, very interesting man. I said, who is that? His name is Sigmund Freud. I said, thank God we've stopped. All right, okay. So that's what our children are growing up in, okay? That's the internet. That's over there. So there's no point in saying we'll keep it all away from them, you know? What are you protecting them from? Anyway, so that's a big question. We called this a self-organized learning environment. And S-O-L-E in English, soul. It went viral all over the world. The teachers use it everywhere, including in this country. Because it's so simple to do. Few computers, a big question, the internet, let them go. Some teachers claim they would do a semester's worth of work in 25 minutes. Just like that. So basically, this is just a summary. It's small, so I'll read a bit for the people at the back. Set up a few computers. Screens should be large, easily visible. In the first few minutes, build up to a big question. You don't just write a question on the board, okay? You build up to it, like I did with the eyes closed and all that. And then let the children self-organize. Once they've done that, listen to the answers from a few groups after some time, and then, you know, kind of summarize. I don't add anything. I only say, he said this, she said that group found out something interesting. Just put it all together. Don't say, there is something that I know that you don't know. That doesn't work. Some glimpses.
How the iPod and iPad can figure out where you are in the world.
Was Paul Cézanne. Cézanne was his second name and Paul was his first name.
His paintings, he made them three-dimensional, so that was achieved by the front being lighter than the back of the painting, so that showed three-dimensional.
Let's just look at this question one more time and read what it says. Sit on your bottoms. It says, how does the physical and climatic environment we have in Australia affect the way we
Well, widely, but by far the largest part of Australia is
Dos maiores estudiosos modernos.
Just to give you an idea of what it looks like. And it works on every continent. It works exactly the same way. So, after doing this for years, several years, I had to write this. You know, it's a big, big thing to write for a teacher. I've been a teacher all my life, so it's hard for me to write this. But unsupervised groups of children can use the internet to learn anything by themselves. Sorry. So what do we do with that? And you might, I'm sure you might ask, raise questions about it. So what do you mean by learn anything? To what depth? To what, how deep is the learning? How do they understand what they're doing? There can be many questions. We'll come to questions. If you have a question, just write it down. But I'm putting that up for you to see. So our big question, my big question, how does it work? So it's strange that I started out as a physicist. I drifted into education without knowing anything much about the subject. And I bumped into something that nobody could explain, how this sort of learning was happening. And the answer dragged me back to my old subject, physics. Let me see if I can explain that to you. If you look at that piece of nature, does it know about symmetry, about beauty, about color, about shape? Does it know any of this? Then how does it do it? We don't know. Physicists have a name for it. They call it a self-organizing system. Not in the sense of organization of the self, not like that, okay? Self-organizing altogether. Nature is full of it. Almost all of nature. We are self-organized. Out of methane, ammonia, water, lightning, amino acids, DNA, the apes, Homo sapiens. Self-organizing systems. A flock of birds, How does an individual bird inside know where to go? In what way to fly? Who makes that pattern? We don't know. Self-organizing. There are two things that happen when you allow a system to just self-organize. You get emergent behavior and you get something else. But before I come to that, I want to do one very simple, a tiny experiment, okay? If you will please do it for me. What I want you to do is to clap synchronously together in time. Can you do it, please? Okay, thanks. If you record that and play it back in slow motion, what you'll hear are the first few seconds of chaos. And then the claps come together. Now, if I were to ask you, any one of you, who brought the claps together? If I were to say, did you bring the claps together? And she will say, no, I was just clapping. So nobody brought the claps together, not any human being here. Who decided the frequency? Nobody. Who decided the volume? Nobody. So what am I supposed to conclude? That there is something in this room that is not human. So, what else can I conclude? Well, it's actually true. It's not an alien, it's a principle. It's called spontaneous order. And it happens everywhere in nature. So for those of you who remember your high school physics, we have a law in thermodynamics which says nature goes from order to disorder. Well, one of the biggest findings of the 21st century is that there is also the exact opposite, spontaneous order. And you saw it right here in this room. So how does spontaneous order work? Does it have anything to do with learning? Well, let me take a completely inanimate object, a pond, a sheet of water. And I want to teach that sheet of water how to make a drop and how to throw it up. Okay, I want to teach it. But you say, what do you mean teach it? It doesn't understand language. Well, I will make a teacher's intervention, and I will see if it learns. Do you see that? That's where I froze it and took the first picture. So the answer to the question, is the drop falling in or falling out? The answer is the drop is falling in, except that the drop was not made by anybody. The drop was made by the pond. It was just copying the original intervention. And it was copying it exactly. Okay? Spontaneous order. So basically, what shall we teachers do when you have children, when you have this huge internet, when you allow them to self-organize, you allow them to be chaotic? It would be quite reasonable to suppose that spontaneous order will appear. So what can I as a teacher do? Well, my suggestion is, we can't be a guide. We can't be a supervisor. We can't be a guru standing and telling them things. We can only say, you go, I'll come with you. That's all. So the teacher in this framework is a friend. So this process, I found, can be amplified by a very simple method. Okay, let me explain that method to you. You know, with children, parents and teachers use discipline as their main pedagogical tool, one of the main pedagogical tools. So you would say to your child, do your homework. Please do your homework. Because, you know, if you don't do your homework, then you won't do well in school. If you don't do well in school, you won't have a good life. You must do your homework. The teacher says, you must practice a little bit more your mathematics, you know, you really must practice a little bit more. But there is one other person, okay? For the lack of a better example, I'm going to call it the grandmother. The grandmother doesn't use these methods. What the grandmother says is that when the child does something, the grandmother says, my goodness, how did you do that? When I was your age, I could have never done that. You people, you're so clever these days. And the child says, oh, that's nothing. Let me show you something more. She's driving a pedagogical spiral with admiration, the correct amount of admiration. I called it the method of the grandmother. And in an article in the Guardian newspaper, way back in 2008 or 9, I published, I said, if you are, I didn't say grandmother, I said, if you if you have an internet connection and a web camera, and if you are interested in children, can you give me 1 hour of your time every week for free? And within a couple of weeks, I had hundreds. Many of them were retired teachers. Many of them were grandmothers, but there were men, women, young women. And we gave them a name. The Granny Cloud. Okay? And now, my slum problem from 1999 was solved. I can take the Granny Cloud and I can beam a granny wherever I want. She doesn't go there to teach. She goes there only to converse or to tell them poems or whatever. The children love them, you know, absolutely. And I asked them, of course, children, you know, they're very logical. I asked some children in India, I said, why do you love your screen granny so much? And he thought about it and he said, yeah, I really love her, you know, because we can switch her off anytime. So this is what it looked like. This is from the early days.
That's right, as fast as you can. As fast as you can. You can't catch me. You say it. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Well done, very good.
So this has been going on now for several years between many different countries. I have them now from all over the world, actually. There might be some from Norway. And it produces some very interesting results. I have little girls in extremely remote areas of rural Bengal speaking with a Birmingham accent. So admiration and encouragement used correctly can cause learning through spontaneous order. I think that's the mechanism that we're looking at here. In 2013, I won a prize. It's called the TED Prize. And you know, it's a pretty big prize. It's $1 million. So naturally, when I got the prize, I felt quite happy. You know, I was going to call my bank to say, you know, no more 3-digit numbers. We are talking real money. But then TED said, no, that's not how it works. We give the money to your university, and you do a research project with it. So, okay. So I designed a project that brought two ideas together. The idea of the self-organized learning environment and the idea of the granny cloud. And you bring them and put them together. And I decided that I had enough money to build and operate 7 of these. 5 in India, 2 in England, and then to study what happens over a period of 3 years. We gave it a name, the school in the cloud. Okay, so it's not a website, it's a physical space, but the internet is immersed inside it, you know, or it is immersed inside the internet. So those 3 years just got over last year, 2016. So I now have the data. Not all of it is processed, but I'll tell you a few of the results. First, take a look at what they look like. So it's an area inside your school. If you're building it inside a school, you need a room of some sort. Make it look very different. Okay? It shouldn't look like a classroom at all. It should have big glass walls. Why glass? So that from the outside, you can see everything that's happening inside. Public visibility and safety. Big screens. Why big screens? So that you can see what's on the screen. Okay? That's the biggest control you can have. You don't need any filter. No rows and columns. This is one of the schools in England, George Stephenson High School. As you can see, if anybody looking at that room can make out that it's meant for working in groups. Isn't it obvious? Reconfigurable furniture, etc. This is the remotest site I have. It's in the Sundarbans in India. Sundarbans is, if you imagine the map of India, the Ganges River flows down from the Himalayas into the Bay of Bengal. So where it meets the Bay of Bengal, it forms the biggest river delta in the world. And it's wild. It's the home of the Royal Bengal tiger, huge crocodiles and things like that. There are also children there. Okay. And nothing much else. There's no electricity, no healthcare, no schools, nothing. So in the middle of that, like a spaceship, stands this school in the cloud. It's solar powered, and there's no nearby internet anywhere. So I took a receiver and I raised it on a bamboo pole. At 45 feet, we got a nice 3G signal from somewhere. So then I found out who the supplier was, and we pay him, and we have the internet. We have really good internet there. This is another one. And the activity, very simple. The pedagogical part is really, really simple. What do you do in the morning? You come in the morning, you open the door. And that's all. Like that. So there are no instructions. Occasionally you come in and propose a big question, but basically you just let them be. You wait for the pond to throw up the ball. So again, too many words in this slide, I'm sorry about that. What do schools in the cloud do? First of all, a rapid increase in reading comprehension in whatever language you're doing it in. Rapid, really rapid. Why? Because the internet doesn't know that they are children. So the internet throws everything it has at them. The children don't know what they are supposed to be able to read and what they are not supposed to be able to read, so they read everything, or they try to read everything. In groups, they seem to be able to understand way above the individual comprehension levels. I'm measuring that. It's amazing, absolutely. And then, in that process of reading, their individual comprehension levels start to go up. It improves their sense of well-being. I mean, it's a child's paradise. There's nobody telling them to do anything. There are lots of big computers, lots of internet, and do what you like. So naturally, they feel quite good. It causes learning with good retention. You could go back and say, what did you do? Do you remember we once did something about dreams? I could ask that question 3 years from now to the children I worked with, and they would tell me exactly. But if I were to ask you another question, rather embarrassing one, think back to your school days when you were 10. Can you remember a single lesson? Try and you'll find that you can't. What you do remember is, one day my friend hit me and we had a fight. You remember those things. But what happened inside the classroom? Well, maybe it's all in here somewhere, but we don't remember it. It improves communication and collaboration, and the last result, it changes the teachers. If I have someone in that room, of course I have to have one adult in that room for health and safety. And I used to think that, okay, it's just a job. He or she has to be there, sit there, keep watching. What I didn't realize was that adult would change, because they begin to sense this spontaneous order happening. And they begin to realize how powerful it is. Okay? I hadn't expected that. That's what we know so far. I'm still looking at the data. Okay, that's the end of the good news, and I'm also beginning to run out of time. Here's the bad news. A self-organized learning environment doesn't do anything for exams, because an examination is the opposite of a soul. You're alone, you must use no assistive technology, you're asked a question, and you must produce the answer by hand. Completely unnatural in our time, in today's time. So my teachers would say, yeah, it's fine, we love souls, but we can only do it for up to age 10, 12, 13. After that, the exam. That's what their parents are looking at, that's what the government is looking for, and that's what is my job. What is the exam? It's a memory test, essentially. So where did it come from? Why is the system like that in the first place? I started looking at where did exams come from, that kind of exam. And the answer is actually staring at us. The system versus the soul. This is an office from 1910 or 1920. No assistive technology anywhere. The whole system is run by people. Rows and rows and rows of people. Clerks. What does a good clerk do? He dresses nicely like me, sits in the same spot for 8 hours a day, doesn't look left, doesn't look right, he's not supposed to talk. He's supposed to read and understand instructions and follow them. He has to write down data, transfer data from one ledger to another by hand. And he has to do arithmetic in his head. Reading, writing, arithmetic. The whole world ran with these systems for hundreds and hundreds of years. We needed millions of these people. And we designed a wonderful system to produce them perfectly. Identical clerks. It's called school. And that picture, this is to find out if we succeeded or not. Okay? We create for one day in the year, we create for them 1920. But this is the office that our children are going to go to, isn't it? I mean, everything has changed. We don't have clerks anymore. This office. And, doesn't it look a bit like the hole in the wall? It's people and the internet. And to prepare people for this world, shouldn't the examination system look like this? I mean, it's all so obvious. That's what these kids do all over. That's what all of us do. We live with the internet. We actually sleep with the internet. I mean, I have mine next to my bed. I think many of you do. So why is the exam the only day in the year when it's all taken away from you? What's the point? So Denmark tried it, by the way. After a similar lecture, I was called a couple of years ago to Denmark. The education minister tried it, but she stopped after 3 months. And that's a different story. She said, no, the children are cheating. I said, what does that mean? She said, I gave them the internet so that they can look up websites, but that's not what they're doing. They're going on WhatsApp and talking to each other. I said, don't you think, and this is a recent conversation, I said, don't you think we should redefine cheating? If I use Google Maps to go from here to Bergen Airport, am I cheating? Use of the internet should be allowed during all assessment and examination. I think it's staring at us in the face. I used to feel disappointed that how will the system ever change? But I'm quite happy now. You know why? Because it's going to happen, whether you want it or not. It can't be stopped. Because internet access, which is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, is right now in our pockets. It's entered our watches. It will enter your ears. In another couple of years, it will be inside your eyes. You won't be able to tell by looking at a person if she is looking up the internet or not. If she is saying what she wants to say or she is reading somebody's website. 3 to 5 years' time, that world will be here. And it will destroy the education system. What do you do with a classroom full of children where you can't tell who is looking up the internet? So what do we do then? I think comprehension, communication, and computing should be the key outcomes of schooling. We must subsume reading, writing, and arithmetic into comprehension, communication, and computing, the broader areas. I think the purpose of education should be to enable people to live happy, healthy, and useful lives. I don't think there's any controversy about that. Happy and healthy are relatively easy to figure out. Useful depends on the time, depends on your country, depends on your context. What I'm working on right now is to change the curriculum. Why should the curriculum consist of everything that we know? Take a subject like geography. You say, what have we, the human race, known about geography for the last 2,000 years? That's the curriculum of geography. Why don't we change it to saying, what are the big unknowns, the big things that we don't know in geography? Because that's what drives us as Homo sapiens, the unknown, not the known. And in the process of trying to find the unknown, you anyway run across the known. We need a pedagogy that is immersed in the internet, so that by the time those children with the invisible internet access come in, we're ready. Because anyway, our pedagogical method implies the internet. And we need an assessment that looks for heuristics over process and method. I must explain that. I give you an arithmetic problem. I said, multiply a 3-digit number by a 2-digit number. At the moment, there is a method. You have to do it the way the teacher did it. You do anything else, that's not right. So you multiply, you shift one side and write down. It's a method from 200 years ago. When you were alone on a ship with a piece of paper trying to figure out where you were, you needed to know how to multiply 3-digit numbers by 2-digit numbers by hand. Okay? Today, the important thing is how quickly can you find the answer? And I'll give you my final example on that. In an English classroom, I gave them a sum, a 3-digit number, 2-digit number kind of thing. And I said, work that out, but you can use anything you want. Your phones, the internet, anything. So there's commotion. Oh, we can cheat. I said, yeah, you can cheat. And so just tell me the answer as quickly as you can. And one little girl raised her hand and said, are you sure we can use anything we want? I said, yes. What do you want? She said, can I call my mom? Okay. And that has stuck in my mind, and perhaps it's a good way to end this lecture. If you have a phone, if you have a problem, and if you have a mom, why on earth should you not call her? Right? Why should school stop you? Hopefully somewhere there is the future of learning. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think, do we have time for a few questions?
Yeah. Do you want to ask some questions? Was this interesting?
Question, comment, anything? Do I see a hand somewhere?
We have 2 microphones, one here and Trond has one over there. And no one wants to be first, as always.
No, somebody wants to be first, I'm sure. Somebody was frowning. I've forgotten who it was. Anyway. All right, we have a question there.
What is going to drive the shift that you were talking about in the end of the lecture towards the next vision of the education system? Or what's going to destroy the system?
Well, first of all, when I said destroy the system, I meant, of course, destroy the old system. And obviously, it's not going to go away. It's going to shift and change. So I think your question is valid, that what will it change into? Well, I think I will use those 6 words that I did earlier. Happy, healthy, useful. Imagine them one below the other. Happy, healthy, useful. And imagine comprehension, communication, and computing. So you get a 3x3 matrix. And you define your education system by seeing if anything fits in there. So take something like dance. Does it make you happy? Yes. Does it make you healthy? Yes. Does it make you useful? Yes. You learn a new method of communication, to use your body, to use rhythm to communicate. Yes, yes, yes. Happy, healthy, useful. It must be there in every school. Now take, I don't know if you teach it in your schools or not, now take the 17 times tables. Did you all do that, 17 1, 17, 17 2s, the 34, like that? Okay. So take the 17 times tables. It's taught in England. Does it make you happy? No. Does it make you healthy? Not at all. And does it make you useful? Yes, it did in 1920. Okay. So that's why it's hanging around there. Throw it out. So what's going to happen? I can only tell you snatches of it. And they're frightening for my generation. Writing by hand, scripted handwriting. What's it for? But people get shocked when I say that. Oh, but it's such a fundamental human skill to be able to. Writing by hand, it's making scratch marks on pieces of paper or clay. It's been around since the Assyrians for 5,000 years. Is that the only way to communicate? I'm not saying they should not know how to write, how to string words together to write. But by hand? Why? Make it a hobby, like knitting. So those are some of the changes that will happen to school, and eventually the assessment system. What should the assessment system, just the last little piece of the puzzle, I don't have the full answer, so I'm just telling you what's on the top of my mind. What should a good question be? I tried a question in the Isle of Man near England with 9-year-olds. I said, imagine that you are 9 years old and you live in Dubai. And you live with an aunt, with your auntie, and she is 65 years old. Your father, who works somewhere else, has given you 200 euros and told you, take your auntie and go for a weekend holiday. use the internet to figure out what's the best holiday you can get out of Dubai for 200 euros for a weekend. Okay, so there was bedlam also. Can you imagine that in order to work out that question, the amount that you need to know about travel, about money, about places, about geography, about culture, about interest, everything rolled into that one. Where I'm stuck, I know it's a good question. I know it's a 21st century question, but I don't know how to evaluate the answer. In this case, I got two answers. One group of boys who worked very hard, and they said, we will have a weekend in Manchester. I said, what, two of you from Dubai to Manchester, 200 euros? They had actually done it. They said, there's a discount available from this, and there's a hotel which is combined with that discount, and then if we do that, and they'd actually managed it 2 days in Manchester. But most of the time was on the plane, of course. And then, so I said, okay, that's a fantastic answer. And then a group of girls, actually just two girls, they said, we have thought and thought. It's too little money for a 2-day weekend holiday, and too much travel will come in if we have to go to any interesting place. But we have thought of a solution. There is a fantastic hotel in Dubai. It's called Burj Khalifa. My aunt and I, we are too poor to ever go anywhere near that hotel. We will spend the 200 euros to spend one night at the Burj Khalifa. Now you tell me, how do you evaluate which is the good answer? It would be a fantastic holiday for them, I'm sure. So the exam system, this is what I mean by heuristics over process. How do you think of the problem? That's what our children are going to need. How do you tackle the problem? Okay? And the kind of problems they will have, history is not going to solve it for them. You know, history is not going to tell them what to do with an underground, undersurface ocean on a moon of Saturn. What can history tell us? They will have to solve these by themselves. Okay? Maybe call their mom, or whatever. All right, I have a long answer to a short question.
Okay, I think we have time for one more. Anyone who wants to say anything? Comments, questions? Okay. Well, I think this was very inspiring and interesting to listen to. Sugata will be around for lunch, so if you're a little bit forward-leaning, I'll sit down next to him, and it's a very interesting man to talk to. I sat down with him yesterday, it was very interesting. And finally, thank you very much, Sugata.
Thanks. Thank you.